So the second test of the series gets underway on Friday, which is from when we are recording that to 2 days. Um, Please I can work that that one out quickly.
Good.
So, yeah, it's obviously another early start for people watching in England, 4 o'clock start. Um, but there'll be a few players not involved in the game who played in that first test. There's a couple for India and at least one for England. So, Pete, there's going to be some changes to both teams. Is it? We're touching up before about how England would probably have been unchanged if it wasn't for the injury to Leach. Just do that was the case, and it's literally just it's going to be forced because Leach he didn't really do much wrong, did he? He just obviously he's picked up this injury, and there's no point in playing him in forcing him through when we have the options there. I suppose.
No, absolutely. I think that he probably, yeah, in an ideal world, you don't change a winning team. Maybe the fact that there's 5 tests in and with one straight after the other, we'll probably have more bowling changes. I think our batting lineup isn't likely to change, but our bowling lineup could, as well as Jack Leach. Would surprise me to see Jimmy come back in. I think the likely option is that we will see, maybe if we were going to keep it the same, we see Bashir come in, Shoaib Bashir come in, which would be very exciting because it just sounds so good to have another young, exciting English bowler against this top class Indian side, which actually now look like they're starting to lose some of huge their huge names and their key players. Obviously, no Virat still, and now that we know that the when Jadeja pulled up after the run out, I don't know if you saw, he pulled up clutching the hamstring. That looks like it's going to keep him out of the second test. And also, I don't know what happened to KL Rahul, but it looks like he's out of the second test as well. In fact, he is out of the second test. So there are some big blows on both sides, but for India, I think they are blows that are hard to replace. Leach is a bit easier to replace. Yes, he's our frontline spinner, but we've got some good spinners that look like they're in good confidence, and we also have the fact that we have Jimmy Anderson on the sidelines is always a good bonus as well. KL Rahul and Jadeja and obviously Cody still are much harder to replace.
Yeah, you've got a lot of quality in those three players there who India are going to be without for this second test. I completely agree. You know, having Leach out injured, it's a shame, because obviously he got the injury which kept him out of the Ashes. So it's a real shame for him to only be able to play one test, and then he's having to have another time on the sidelines. Hopefully, it's not as bad as obviously it's a different injury to the one that kept him out of the Ashes. But so hopefully it's not too bad. But as you said, England have the options. You've got the straight spin swap to bring in Shoaib Bashir, which I think is the way we'll go. I can see us going down the avenue of just interchanging the quick bowlers, so it isn't like one in, one out, because unless things change drastically, I don't think there's going to be much need to have two out and out pace bowlers
Mm.
in these games. I know Ben Stokes said that he'd wait and have a look at the pitch tomorrow before deciding on the 11, which kind of suggests that we might name the 11 tomorrow, as in obviously the day before. So yeah, might just be a few hours until we find out that starting 11 for the second test. But yeah, I can kind of see if Jimmy was going to come in, I think it would be the expensive Wood, and then
Mm.
it would just be a swap of Bashir in for Leach, which I think doesn't weaken our bowling attack whatsoever, really. And then as we touched on earlier, you've then also got a very confident Tom Hartley. You've got a Joe Root who, off the back of bowling 40 odd overs in the first test and taking the fourth in the first innings, and then also Ryan Ahmed, who he didn't get the chance to bowl too much, but I mean, I think he's an all round quality player, and again, he's still young. He's still finding his feet in Test cricket, but he's taken to it like a duck to water, and very similar to what we're seeing with Hartley. So yeah, there will be there'll be a few big names missing for the second Test. But yeah, I completely agree over the whole mindset of England's issues are easier to handle than the ones which India are going to have going into that next Test.
Yeah, you mentioned Joe Root actually. I wonder if there is going to be two seamers, you keep Wood maybe, and Jimmy comes in for one of the three spinners, Leach being the option because he's injured, and just keeping Joe Root going over because as you said, he bowled the most overs out of anyone in the first innings, took 4 wickets. He's proving that actually time and time again, despite being called a part-time bowler, he actually is just an all-rounder. He really is. I go back to when he opened the bowling in a T20 World Cup final against West Indies in India. He has masses of experience as a spinner. His best figures came in Ahmedabad in that on that pitch, albeit the pitch that basically spun 90-degree angles, but nonetheless it was in India and a spinning pitch. He is a genuine option with the ball, and he didn't invent it, but in the Ashes he had the ball that came out almost like sidearm with a bit of whip. So he's inventive. He comes up with new options as well. And the thing that sells Joe Root even more as a spinner, and I know we're getting kind of off team news here and just celebrating Joe Root, but the thing that I'll make one point before we can go back to that. The thing that makes him a good spinner is that he thinks like a batter because he's also happens to be one of the best batters in the world, and he can choose his six deliveries based on what he thinks he would do in that scenario almost. So it makes him even better as an option. And I think that if we were going to bring in two seamers, I think this is a good opportunity to do so because we have to bring a spinner out. We have to bring Jack Leach out, so we could put two seamers in and bring in Jimmy, which I don't think would be a bad thing at all. Because in the first innings, one thing that we did lack when India were piling on runs and Jaiswal was piling on runs at the top of the order is that we lacked someone that could just hold a line, and Jimmy could do that. That's what we lacked in the first innings. Jimmy could do that. So it's an option, I suppose. It's an option.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different scenarios what we could see. Obviously the difficulty thing is we'll only really find out when Stokes has a look at that pitch, and it'll be a case of deciding, is it worth having that extra quicker option in to maybe help to kind of pull back in the Indian batters at times when, as you said, we couldn't really do that, and we probably needed that in the first Test. Or is it a case of he's going to look at the pitch and he's going to think quicks are going to get barely anything out of this? I mean, it was touched on. I think it was yesterday or the day before where McCullum was asked in an interview, and he basically didn't rule out the possibility of having a full spin attack, even on this tour, which I think would be, I'd have to say, would probably be the next evolution of Bazball if we rocked up with just spinners. And I think it would be glorious, but my God, it would be one hell of a risk. But I mean, it's not like research doesn't go into these things, but just the idea of like having the prospect of like Hartley and Joe Root opening in a test match from either end is just, it's the sort of thing where like a few years ago, you completely scoff at it, but not now because it just doesn't seem that ridiculous anymore.
No, why not? Just do it. It's like you said, it's the final. If Bazball was a Pokemon, it would be in India. It would be the final evolution of it. It would 100%.
Well, not quite. I think the peak evolution would be if we have all these spinners and it's not going to plan, and then like we just throw the ball to Johnny Bairstow who does like some sort of like piddly median pace, but he doesn't. He just sort of like basically chucks it down. There's no real line length or movement from him. He's just
It's
kind of
just
chucking.
it.
He's just chucking pies down from like a from like a 5-yard run up or something.
and gets a fifer.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It, I mean, he'd end up balling like I don't know. Say if Coley comes back in, he'd end up balling Coley in that third test.
Of course, it would have to happen. Um,
Yeah,
but we were saying as well that England have got some selection thinking to do. India also has some selection thinking to do. They still don't have any Kohli to go with. That looks like he'll be back for the third test at the moment. That's all we know. And they have obviously lost one of their best spinners, one of the best spinners in the world, a huge character as well as player to replace in Jadeja, and KL Rahul, who looked in decent touch and is a good quality player in that middle order. We mentioned it actually in the first kind of pod about the England India series, in that Kohli's a miss, but India have so much potential to replace him with that actually, is it a huge miss? And when we were at 400 plus, um, perhaps we were proved right, but um, now that they've got three batters to replace and a gun fielder and genuinely brilliant all rounder in Jadeja, is this going to be testing those limitless sources of manpower for the Indian test team?